evening, everybody, and welcome to our premiere of Dialogue with the Diaspora. I'm Ambassador Danny Terres, and I will be your host. If you saw our promos for this show, we were scheduled to start at 8 p.m. We're starting now a half an hour, a little bit earlier, to ensure that we do not clash with us, the experts, which will begin at 8:30 p.m. immediately after this show. With that housekeeping matter taken care of, we can officially begin our very first episode of Dialogue with the Diaspora. Now, the word diaspora has many different meanings for Belizeans who live at home, and it evokes different emotions in different contexts. The bottom line, the diaspora is our family. Despite the many individual views towards the diaspora, and there are many, we can objectively agree that diaspora is a complex and rich ecosystem that, if strategically partnered with, we can provide a tremendous boost to our country's socio-political and economic development. That is what this show is all about, and we are certainly happy that you are able to join us. We will explore the very many subtopics that involve the diaspora over the next few weeks, but for tonight, we will begin with the one that is perhaps the most pressing, something that is on the minds of Belizeans from Alaska all the way to New York and beyond. The full reopening of the Philip Goulson International Airport and the continued repatriation of Belizeans who are abroad. Of course, we got the news yesterday that the airport will no longer reopen the way we had planned. And to discuss with us what all this means, we have joining us tonight in studio, we have the Mrs. Karen Bevans, the director of the Belize Tourism Board, and Ms. Judith Alpuche, the chief executive officer and chair of the COVID-19 National Task Force. We want to welcome you ladies to the show tonight. And of course, we are going to be joined later on by not with locals, because there's nothing wrong with talking to locals, but what we want to do is have a discussion with our Belizeans who are abroad. So joining us virtually are Mrs. Debbie Macmillan. Dr. Macmillan is the Director of Operations for Intensive English Institute at Ball State University in Indiana. Welcome, Debbie. Fellow Cayogel.
Good evening. Thank you, Dan.
All right. And also, we have with us somebody that is no stranger to us. We have somebody, and I will say this before I go any farther, Mr. Ray has been a tremendous voice for us. When I say us, I mean in the officialdom in terms of helping the Embassy of Belize send its message out to the thousands of Belizeans. So before we start, and before I even say welcome, I want to say thank you, Mr. Ray. We have with us Mr. Ray Gongora is the CEO of Brata and hails from Florida. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ray.
Thank you, Ambassador.
All right. Well, now that we have everybody introduced, we will open up by getting right into the meat of the matter. Let us talk about the reopening of the Philip Goulson International Airport. Ladies, where are we?
Well, it's been delayed, as you noted, but nevertheless, we keep on pressing to ensure that everything is in order. With the opening of the PGIA, we knew from the onset with the NOC, the National Oversight Committee, as well as the task force, that, and just talking to stakeholders on a whole, that we needed to employ a risk mitigation strategy, because nothing is 100%. Even from the repatriations that we're doing now, we're seeing exactly what we expected, that some people will come in and that they will be COVID positive. So how then do we open up, ensure that our Belizeans can come in, as well as have a restart of the foreign aspects of tourism, that phase 3 of the tourism restart in as safe a manner as possible. And so what we did was to try to build layers of protection, because that is the overriding factor. How do we keep everybody safe? the community here in Belize, as well as those returning. How do we keep everybody safe? So two things, there are two ways then. There's one corridor that we have created for tourists, for those who want to come. And these will be foreigners, of course, but there will be Belizeans who want to come and just come on holiday in Belize. And so that corridor has been created, and I'm sure Mrs. Bevans will get into the features of that corridor and how we propose to keep people safe. And then the other is around repatriation. Right now, we're allowing in Belizeans, permanent residents, diplomats who are accredited to Belize, and those persons come in through an application process. So they have to apply to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There is an application form on the COVID-19 website, and they answer questions including, ensuring or showing proof that you are in one of those categories. You're a Belizean, you're a PR, you're a diplomat, resident diplomat, as well as providing information about your plans. How do you intend to travel to Belize? When do you intend to travel to Belize? Because it's not only the repatriation flights coming in once a week through PGIA, but people are also coming in through the northern and western borders. So for planning, etc., all that information is gathered. It's vetted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and people then receive an approval letter. So after people are vetted, then they're free to go and buy their tickets and make their arrangements and come in. When people come in, there is a mandatory quarantine, 14 days quarantine that they have to go into. You're swabbed when you come in, so they're establishing whether or not you're negative and positive, and what we're seeing with each repatriation flight, as well as with each group of people that come in through the northern or western borders, we're getting people who are positive. But the safety net, if you will, or valve, whichever one you want to call it, is that people go into 14-day quarantine. And so they're swabbed at the end of that period. And if there's another negative test, if you get 2 negative tests, then you're released. And you can go into the community.
And I think, if I may, and right before I invite Karen to weigh in, Judith, I think one of the most important things to understand about what has been happening is that we have a process that contains those who come in. And we have not been able to see any kind of spread, any kind of anything getting out of hand, because it is a contained and a clearly understood process. Moreover, it gives our healthcare workers and people in the system an opportunity to be able to work with these patients and be able to isolate them. So
exactly.
And you said something very important earlier, Judith, and that was about the different people coming in. The gorilla in the room is the economic recovery of Belize. And very important to the economic recovery of Belize is the recovery of the tourism industry. Karen, where are we right now in terms of the tourism industry? And how important is it for there to be some kind of reopening, whenever that happens? And we know it's been slightly delayed. Where are we right now?
I like the word slightly delayed. I'm hoping it's slightly delayed. But yes, months and months of work, Daniel. And moving on from where Judith left off. For the opening of the airport, we have 4 different classifications of visitors or returning Belizeans we expect. We have divided them into 4 categories so we could clearly understand the different requirements and the different processes. The first set, we look at the Belizeans and residents. And the Belizeans and residents include the Diaspora, who we are talking to tonight, those with work permits, and of course, permanent residents. We also have the persons with business interests as the second classifications. Those are people maybe constructing a hotel. Since March, when the airport closed, I have not been able to come in to check on the status of my business persons with that type of interest would be able to come in. Next, we have foreigners owning a second home in Belize, or QRP, we call them, qualified retired persons, or those with long-term lease. This is the time for you now to come back. And finally, we have the last group of foreign tourists, who are those that will vacation, enjoy a nice vacation experience within our safe corridors. I think tonight we are focusing more on the diaspora. And just to give you an example of the process for them, the diaspora, as Judith mentioned in the repatriation process, go through an application. With the process after the airport reopens, we'll still require an application. But that application is not an approval for entry. It's an application for us to, okay, you want to come home, your passport number, this is your address that you use, your home address. We vet that, we verify, yes, you are indeed a Belizean. You are classified as a Belizean, so you can make your preparations now to come home. Buy your ticket, you make your preparations to come home. Then, 72 hours before the time of travel, you download the Belize Health app. Download the app and complete the information on the app. Once you complete the information, you will automatically receive a QR code and a unique ID number. Once you receive that, you know you're done and all set now to board the plane. You use that code, board the plane. We expect that as you travel, you will be adhering to the protocols of the airlines, of course, particularly wearing a mask. You land in Belize. You're greeted, of course, by our friendly airline representatives. You know, they normally walk up to the plane, greets you, give you a little summary of what to expect when you deplane. You deplane, and the first thing you arrive on, you walk on a shoe sanitizing mat. Again, this is because we have implemented all our high standards of safety protocols in Belize. You go through the route now heading towards customs and immigration, but you're first greeted and a couple questions asked just to ensure you're Belizean or you're a tourist. Because of course you'll go in separate lines and do separate tests. So those types of questions are asked. The person would definitely ask you, have you downloaded the app? You have your QR code, you have your unique ID. You respond to all that. Okay, you can proceed through, continue the route towards immigration and customs. The next stop is your health officials. The health officials then get the QR code from you or the unique number you have. Using that number, they would then enter that, and that brings up your information that you had entered prior to boarding. That information then they use, do your health screening, temperature check, and after the interview with you, they then have a health profile on you. You then proceed now, continue along the road, and you enter our newly constructed health unit at the airport. And in that health unit is where the test will be performed. You would be swabbed. And as a Belizean, it's 50 US per person. But as a Belizean, we'll ask you to overnight one night in a quarantine hotel while you await the results of your test. So once you're swabbed, you are then cleared, and you can proceed then into the immigration and customs hall. You go through your immigration process. Of course, you meet your immigration officers. They're all in booth with sneeze guards, shield up. And as you proceed along the route, of course, all our flow markers are there with the social distancing markers or signs. Sanitizing stations are along the route as well, so you sanitize. Everything to show that we have implemented high standards of safety protocol so you could have a safe return home or a safe vacation in Belize. Continuing to immigration, deliver your passport, the immigration officer goes through their process. You're cleared to enter Belize then, go through to customs. At customs now, during the time you are doing that route, your bags have been removed from the aircraft, sanitized as well, placed on the carousel, and you alone then are allowed to pick up your bag. You pick up your bag, place it on the luggage or the baggage scanners for customs. The customs officers as well, they will be in booth with their sneeze guards and all, protected as well with their mask. And during this entire time, the traveler is expected to be wearing a mask throughout the entire process in the airport. When you clear the customs, at that time you now could exit, but because you now have to, you are now to wait one night at a hotel for the results of your test, you're escorted in one of our gold standard tour operator vans and escorted to the quarantine hotel for the night, awaiting the results of your test.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, that was quite an in-depth explanation, but we let it run because it is imperative that you understand that Belize is doing everything it can to try to mitigate against people coming in without us being able to detect any issues at the airport. It is a human endeavor, it is not a perfect endeavor, but it is the best we could do given the circumstances. Let us understand that this COVID-19 situation is something that the entire world is grappling with, especially members of the diaspora in the United States will understand very clearly that even the most developed of nations do not have it under control. And with the resources that we have at our disposal, these people like Judith, Karen, and their teams in health and in other areas have been working tirelessly to come up with this plan to be able to bring people into Belize, to bring Belizeans like yourselves back to the motherland in as safe way as we can. Now,
and then the situation remains so fluid that almost every day something changes, and it will continue to change.
That's the way
it's not from a lack of, it's not from a lack of planning or anything or consideration. It's a constant, and I'm sure that everybody knows this, that we're learning about COVID. You know, I listen to Dr. Manzanero every Monday, because every Friday, all the chief medical officers in the Caribbean have a meeting, and they're constantly sharing information. I know that Karen and certainly CEO Dujon and his team from tourism are constantly sharing experiences with the other Caribbean countries who are very similar to us. They're small, close communities, interrelated communities, and they serve
receiving their own diaspora,
as well as looking at how do they open up their tourism safely as well. And so some of them have gone ahead of us, and that's an advantage because we're constantly learning from them. You know, features that we have put in, like a double rapid test for tourists, you know, that came out of learning. And that's something that Belize actually suggested to the chief medical officer grouping, that, you know, we know that in terms of ensuring that there is a higher rate of accuracy, to use that layman's term, to do a double test rather than just one, to try to mitigate, because it's not perfect. And that's why I'm saying it's really a risk mitigation strategy that we have employed, and all the pieces have to work together to create safety. And we're particularly concerned about people going into the community, people who are repatriating and coming back into the community. Right now, people go into the hotels for 14 days, and so you're cordoned off. When the PGIA reopens, the proposal is for people to go that one night, and just to say that we'll be producing videos and diagrams, etc., of that process.
There's a lot more information to come.
There's a lot more communication that we will provide. That's very necessary because we want people to know what to expect, so it's as smooth as possible. Because it's going to be a very different experience for when people come home. Yeah. So just to finish the thought, in terms of when the PGIA reopens, then people will be, if you have a negative test, and this is for Belizeans, PRs, etc., you then will be fitted with a tracking bracelet, and you go into your own self-quarantine, you know? And we do have to do a lot of education on both sides about people being realistic about whether or not they can host a family member in self-quarantine.
And Judith, you know, you said something very important, that what we're putting together is merely a component, perhaps one of the most important parts of this whole machinery. If it will work, one of the most important aspects of it is our Belizeans coming home.
Absolutely.
Those Belizeans coming back to the motherland. And speaking about them, I think it is good time for us to invite Dr. Macmillan and Mr. Ray, if they have any comments at this point, to join us in the conversation. We went on a bit because we think it is important for people to understand what is it we're trying to accomplish. And there's much more to be said. But we must go back to understanding this is a conversation. So we have said our piece. We have said what the plan is. Let us now invite Dr. Macmillan and Mr. Ray. I don't know who wants to start. Doc, you're smiling. Please, go ahead.
No problem. Good night. Thank you, Mrs. Bevans. Thank you, CEO. I want to confirm what I heard because I received multiple questions about something the CEO mentioned, CEO Alpuche. If I come in with a negative PCR, it sounds like then I will be able to go home. I live in San Ignacio. I arrived within 72 hours. I took the test. I arrived with my negative PCR. I can go home to San Ignacio. Am I right?
No, we're asking everyone. For Belizeans and people going into the community, everybody will be tested and asked to go into mandatory quarantine to await their results.
This is required.
We will do the
Yes.
PCR test here on arrival.
Here on arrival.
Right, and you're not asking them to go into quarantine.
Pardon?
They're required.
Yes, you are
They're
required
to go in, right.
Right.
to await your results.
Is there a reason why my CPR that I want to take would not be accepted and I have to take the PCR in Belize? What's the rationale for choosing Belizean PCR over the one that I am taking? If it's within the 72 hours.
The timing.
Well,
And that is the thing. Which paper win?
Okay, we understand the question. Let's ask CEO Alpuche to enlighten us in terms of why we are asking that the PCR test for Belizeans and for those resident here be the one that is administered here upon landing in Belize.
It's really about the availability. We were anticipating that a lot of people will not be able, because just looking at what is happening in the United States in terms of the length of time it takes to even access the test. The other piece of it is that, and I'll be very frank and honest, there has been a lot of what is being experienced in the Caribbean, a lot of fake tests being brought in. Okay. And we have seen cases with repatriation where people have come in with tests and then they end up coming out positive when they're in quarantine. So it's really a safeguard that we want to ensure that when people go out into their self-quarantine, that at least they're starting with a negative PCR. That we're assured.
Further to that, you're going into the community.
Yes.
Taking a test 72 hours before you travel, traveling along the route, coming to Belize, the timing, anything can happen within that length of time. So it's best we do it here.
I have a question. Well, I have several questions. Thanks, Ms. Bevans and Ms. Alpuche for having me. You're saying that once you reach and you take this test and say you come positive, what happened to the plane load?
That is something where the Ministry of Health will start with its own process of contact tracing and determining. And I don't want to speak to the health aspects of it because I'm not a doctor and I will not play one on TV.
Okay. No, well, I think
but then you see,
what
then you
people
see,
are concerned about is if they arrive in Belize, this one person arrived and they are negative, but then somebody on the flight tests positive. They're scared that when they go, that they don't only have to spend 1 day in a hotel, but have to pay for 2 weeks because one person was positive.
if your test will be administered, you will wait at the airport. You will wait for your results. If your result is negative, then you will be fitted with a bracelet and you will be asked to go home to self-quarantine for 13 days. And what you just talked about illustrates the importance of the self-quarantine, because we realize that there's a risk if people come out with a negative PCR that you say, oh, well, everything okay, and I could go and, you know, hug up granny and all of that. But we're still asking that we're trusting that you will go into home quarantine and self-isolate for 13 more days just to be sure. And then you will be swabbed again to see if you end up with 2 negatives. Then your bracelet will be taken off and you will be free to go into the community. Right?
How much does the bracelet cost?
The cost of the bracelet is $150 Belize for the 14-day period.
And the app for the phone?
The health app is free.
Free download.
Okay.
So that will be on the Apple and the Google Play Store, and you'll be able to download that for free.
Miss Judith, Miss Bevans, you talk about the QR code. And what you're saying is that everybody who comes to Belize must bring a smartphone with them. They can't bring the lead phone where they have home, where they change the SIM card. They must have one smartphone. And when they reach airport, you're going to have Wi-Fi for them.
Yes. Yes.
That's correct.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Could I ask a few, Ray, do you mind if I ask a couple, maybe one question? How many more do you have, Ray? Because I want to get into
I got one lot. You go ahead. You go ahead. We're going one. We're going one.
So look, there will be a part.
We'll make sure that you guys get those questions. Please go ahead, Doc.
I want to say I appreciate your candid response, CEO Alpuche, because that does make sense. If you have been getting fake PCRs, I understand that. But I want to go back to the very beginning, which is a part of the repatriation. This is even before we get to the airport, if you don't mind me pulling back. Like you all are doing, you are doing a lot of planning. We appreciate that. Please understand, and when I listen to Mrs. Bevans, that was even more comforting to understand all that is being put in place. That's very good. But one of the things on our side too in going home is planning. But I can't plan if I'm not so sure how much the hotel is going to cost me. I am glad I heard about Mr. Ray brought in the one with the bracelet will cost. I didn't see that anywhere where we could get that information that would cost. So the hotel, the cost of the hotel, so that's the part that people want to know. Can we get those costs up front? Because to be maybe you can't afford to go home after all. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
That's a very good suggestion.
Absolutely.
Put together a little.
And we're prepared to.
And that is what, and then one last thing on reaching, on before. People are asking, can we get, again, going back to planning, can we get an idea of how long the approval process is?
Along with that, Debbie, people are asking, they're saying that, okay, for 3 weeks now they submitted their application. No word. Who for call? They don't know. Who for email? Nobody to answer. There's nobody with a name and a number to try, because people want to follow up. They have their phone. They want to get in touch. They want to know, can I go home? People that get vexed.
Yeah. Now, on that note, and with everybody's permission, our conversation is already getting into full stride, and we're answering some of the questions that are coming. I'm sure you have many more questions on your mind, but we are due for our first commercial break soon. Before we do so, we wish to run our first Diaspora Classifieds, a quick listing of Belizean-owned businesses and services providers abroad. Today we start off in California, where I know we have a lot of Belizeans watching.
Belizeans living abroad have represented us well by setting up their businesses, sharing the flavors of Belize, and keeping the diaspora connected to home. When in California, these are some of the restaurants you should look out for: Trace's Belizean Restaurant, Little Belize Restaurant, Mars Caribbean Garden Belizean Kitchen, Belizean Paradise, and Christina's Restaurant. Looking for food on the go or for catering? You can check out Belizean Cravings and Saraba Belizean Cuisine. If you enjoy delicious juices, you can check out Juice by Chanel. Most Belizeans in the state send home packages and are always looking for reliable shipping agencies. Here are a few Belizean-owned ones: Belizean Queen Freights, Ameribel Freight Services, and Kaya Cargo Freight and Online Services. Supporting Belizean-owned businesses in the diaspora contributes to strong Belizean communities abroad, and it also trickles down to Belizean communities back home.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for joining us in this premiere, where we are having a dialogue with our Belizean diaspora. Before we get going, I do want to remind everybody that coming up right after the show is the Ask the Experts. Many of the questions that you may have may be answered in detail in that platform. So please do not go away. Do not change the dial, as they used to say, before digital TV. Stay with us, and there will be many more questions to be answered. But before we do that, Ms. Ray had a question. Ms. Judith.
No, I hear you absolutely, Mr. Gongora, and I had a long conversation with CEO Burns just this evening, as a matter of fact, looking at how do we streamline the processes, just the administrative issues that they're facing, to make sure that there can be a response within 3 days. So they're streamlining the processes for that. In terms of, I know they have an email that's attached to the application. So I will certainly take back the message that in terms of how can we ensure that there are responses to the queries that people are raising through that medium. But just to say that efforts are being made to streamline the process so that we can revert within 72 hours, because you're absolutely right. If that's the beginning of the process in terms of people needing to know if they're approved so that they can start their planning. And then the costs is another important aspect.
Absolutely.
I think it was Debbie that asked the cost of the hotels. We have made arrangement with hotels for quarantine for the one night. And the range would be from 110 to 150 Belize. 110 to 150 Belize.
Belize dollars.
Belize dollars, yes.
Okay.
So just to do the math, because it's important,
Yes.
the test is 100 Belize, 50 US. The bracelet will be 150 Belize for the 14 days. And then the hotel, the one night stay will
It's
be
150 Belize, and that includes 3 meals.
right
Absolutely.
at the upper end,
Maximum.
so that people can. So it's much cheaper once the PGIA open. It's going to be much cheaper, and because we heard people's concern that the 14 days is a bit steep for some people, and we hear and understand that, and that's how we could keep people safe. But now we're in a position where we can employ the technology to be able to support people quarantining at home. There's going to be a lot of trust still, because people really need to understand, and we can't emphasize that enough.
Absolutely.
That as you said,
we
the most
cannot do this
important,
without them doing their part.
absolutely. And
Can't
the
be done.
families as well, and the families as well. So, you know, we don't want people going into the community, into self-quarantine, thinking, okay, I have a negative PCR. You know, I spent my night, I got a negative PCR, so everything's fine. Because we have had cases where people have a negative PCR in the first instance, and then when they're tested again, it's positive. So just as out of an abundance of caution, you know, and this is really about how do you keep yourself and your loved ones that you're coming home to safe.
Absolutely. And before I go back to Debbie, because I know you have more questions, Doc, the message that we want to ensure that we underscore is, Belizeans, we love to have you back in the motherland. We are rolling out the red carpet. This red carpet is going to be unusual because of the unusual circumstances. But we certainly don't want you to change your plans for coming home. We are just laying out what will happen when you do come back home. Dr. Macmillan, you had more questions.
Well, to be fair, I took away some of Ray. Ray, you have one or two. I'll give Ray two. You have two, Ray?
Well, you see, Ambassador, the thing is that summer we come out here through the back. And since the airport closed again, or open, we ready to go back home through the back. You understand?
Mr. Ray, you're the making Mr. Ray. You're the putting in a tight spot.
Serious.
What the hell?
Mr. Ray, to be real.
No, I'm serious, because the airport closed now. It's not open. All right? Some people want to know if they could get on the Salvation Army flight now. You call it repatriation flight. And how they could get on there.
The repatriation process as it stands continues. So if people can come, people are coming through the northern border, because some people are coming in from Cancun, etc., especially those who are in Europe right now and outside of the United States. We have people coming in from the western border, and we have that repat flight through United Airlines that comes in from Houston every Friday. But until the PGIA is officially opened, that system where you have to pay for your 14 days quarantine continues. So you can still come home under the same,
my
same
number
circumstances.
2 question. Thank you, Doc. The number 2 question is the duty-free shop going to be open at the airport in Belize?
That is
Very
an
important question, Mr. Ray. Very important question, let me tell you.
And the reason why
take that serious.
Mr. Ray, right now they're renovating. There's extensive renovation.
So you went better. You went better.
Yes, and one of the things that I saw in my last walkthrough was that they were really pimping out, right?
Yeah.
The duty-free. So I'll be sure to ask that question as to what is the opening date for the duty-free, because that's a very important question.
You see, people want to know if they have to shop out here, buy them Black Label, buy them ham, buy them turkey, buy them sausage and then cheese. Then the next question is, when they get home, when they get home, they want to know when they get home if the relative could take away the thing from them at the airport while they go to the hotel.
No contact.
No, I think the benefit, Mr. Ray, is that they could use some of that when they pick up at the airport, the day or so. Hopefully, the day that they spend at that hotel in quarantine.
It'll get rough.
So,
Yes. That's a good point.
It'll get rough.
We really want to ensure that there's proper quarantining, and so no contact with I know it's very hard. You're bringing a new tennis, and then they write them in, and they write them, but for the safety of everybody,
absolutely,
you have to wait a little while for the new tennis, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, Doc, your turn.
CEO, following up on that same path on no contact, just a little bit questions being asked, because basically we feel that the tourists are being treated better than some of us returning, right?
Yes.
So I noticed that the foreign tourists, I heard earlier in the press office, they have a safe corridor to their gold standard hotel. But why can't we have a safe corridor to our gold standard home? I may have a room downstairs that is, and you can check it out. Can't we have gold standard homes?
But that is exactly what we're trying to do, to create your safe corridor to go home. That's exactly what we're doing. So in the same way, the tourists will download the app and we'll monitor the tourists through the health app. We're using the Guardian Angel with Belizeans and those returning to the motherland, as Ambassador Gutierrez says. You know, so it's really about that. How do we help to create that safe corridor for you? You know, but you will need to quarantine for 13 days, because remember now, when the tourist goes into the Gold Standard Hotel and use the Gold Standard tour operators, they are trained to be able to properly social distance, to handle these people, to really implement universal precautions, to use that terminology. So what we want to do is when you go into the community after your 13 days and your 2 tests, quarantining, self-quarantining in your gold standard home, as you said, you know, helping you to stay there will be that Guardian Angel app, you know. And remember then you can go into the community and visit.
If I may just insert, there is, in the cyber world, questions are coming in as well. And one of the questions, Judith, is, do people who have a second home in Belize, are they being accepted as a part of the current process up until the airport reopens?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
So there is your
It's
answer.
only, right now, only Belizeans, permanent resident.
So if you have a second home in Belize, please, 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 just a little bit more patience as we are able to contain the current situation. And I have every confidence that we will. And then you can make your way to the Jewel to spend some time, where it has always been, since March to now, relatively safe. And we hope to continue to make it as safe as we can.
And we are still hoping for
So if you're coming only for
Absolutely.
7 days or less, where does all this 14-day infographics work out? And do you get a discount on the bracelet and whatnot?
If you don't have the time to quarantine, I would really advise that you look at some other alternative, like coming in as a tourist, because nothing, when PGIA fully opens. I will cross-check that with the Ministry of Health to be very sure, but I know that what is harped on is that you do the full 14-day.
Yeah, because these are people who have houses, building, and other businesses going on that they just wanted to run in and take care of the business and get out of there.
So when the other categories then, the other categories that Mrs. Bevans describes is not limited to foreigners. So like you can come in as a Belizean, but a person with business interest. And that's a slightly different scenario that we're dealing with.
So it doesn't have to be 14 days.
If it depends on the category you come in under.
With business interest, you would provide at the application stage, you will provide your entire itinerary, and that will be used for tracking. So it could be a 7-day itinerary, and we'd use that 7 day to track, and you depart after that 7 days.
But you have to prove that you have the business interest, because we don't want people using it as a little loophole.
That's the reason for the application.
Right.
So that's the reason for the applications, because, and it's not that we're trying to be mean or bureaucratic or exact, or we don't want to give nobody want to leave blind. It's really, you know, how do we keep people safe? And a lot of thought and consultation, using the science, using the experience of other Caribbean countries. And it's from them, actually, Bahamas and all of them, that are getting all these fake PCRs that we've had to recalibrate. So it's not like people being overly, you know, we would love for it to be normal where everybody come back for September, we all hug up and dance together, but that's not the reality. So how do we do this keeping everyone safe? That's the bottom line.
And for us to be able to hug up and dance up in the future, we stay safe now.
Yes.
Fake PCR. Check this out. And this serious. This girl pa dead. And they want to bring the body home. And not cremated because the pa already, warning that they want to bury the Lord rich. So, and they want to bring the body home. What the procedure, and this person never died from COVID, but if the body come to Belize, only going to test the body too, and if the body come out positive, what happen? First of all, our condolences to that family. Then they listen tonight for the answer.
Our condolences to that family.
Thank you.
That sounds like, to me, a case that we'd have to consult with Ministry of Health.
And they would have to make that call and provide the guidance on that one.
Yes.
Because,
so who they can get answer from?
It would have to be the Ministry of Health. Can we offline maybe get some contact information
details
for that family?
Yes, please.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
If we can get that offline, and then we can see how we can get them the answers that they need.
Yes, put it on the screen.
Let's do this, Mr. Ray. Could you invite the family to kindly send an email with that information to diaspora.usa@mfa.gov.bz. That is our embassy diaspora contact. And our Ms. Arlette is going to ensure that Ms. Judith and the authorities at the Ministry of Health feel that question.
Definitely.
That's
definitely.
Good. Could I ask you?
We will have to, I am being advised that we need to look at a break. So before we do that, any thoughts from Mr. Ray, any thoughts from Ms. Debbie?
You mean we're ending the session already?
We're ending this session, yes.
There's a part 2 and a part 3.
Oh my Lord.
Again, no.
Unfortunately, time flies when you're having a good time. You don't watch, I never watch. My apologies. So I will take your last comments. But before I do that, I want to thank you both for joining the show. Dr. Macmillan is a part of the Belize Academic Forum. She has not said that. She has volunteered with us, and that's a group of Belizean academics in the United States. Thank you to all of you, because I know several of you are listening. I'll take your last comment. Doc, Mr. Ray, thanks again for joining the show. Last comments.
I don't know how long I have. Anyway, okay, go ahead, I'll defer to I'll have the last word, Mr. Ray.
Okay, I think you may give me your time too. No, this is very good, and I really appreciate it, and I'm sure all the Belams, the people in diaspora in general, we really appreciate this. This is good. Ms. Bevans, Mr. Puche, you have some very good information for us, and as the ambassador said, I will get the email address out to the people, and I am sure that Ms. Arlette, who has been very helpful with the diaspora out here. I mean, people are calling her personally. She not tell me not forget any number, and I just give it out because I don't have the answers. So, but she is doing a hell of a job, and I'm sure she will have be able to answer a lot of questions for people, and appreciate it very much. Doc?
Quick, I just want to slip in something. People do have concerns, privacy concerns about the app. I just need to mention that, because that's a real concern for some people. But I just want to say, first of all, thanks for the opportunity to share the concerns and questions from the diaspora. I want to thank Mrs. Bevans. I am very impressed with all the work being done and to make us safe. And CEO Alpuche, I know I don't envy you. I don't envy anybody, those of you who have to make all these decisions. But I also want the Belizean populace to know that, like when I listened to the press conference today, I share your anxiety. We are sad. It's real. And for us, for me, the major feeling is that of helplessness, because there is not much we can do from here. I mean, we can encourage our people to be safe, but I fear that what Mr. Rim, the last question about somebody dying, for me, it's more that a close family dies and that airport is closed and I am quarantined. I will have to tell you that's my real fear, and that's the fear of many people. So my last word is, we have got to learn to live with this endemic now. And at some point, we have to open the airport. And and we just pray with all the safety measures being put in, we will never satisfy anybody, but I just want people to understand that some of us want to go home. And with the airport being closed and depending on the quarantine, the cost, that is not an option for some of us. But thank you again for the opportunity, and thank you for keeping Belize safe.
And with that interaction, we're at the end of our time with our members of the diaspora, and we are hoping to simply break the ice tonight. But I think we achieved much more. We achieved much more than breaking the ice and having just an interaction. We are reminded of the different channels we have through the embassy. We're reminded of the work that has gone into preparing for the return of Belizeans. And once again, I want to emphasize, Belizeans who are listening, prepare to come back to the motherland for a visit. We want to have you home, and we will do everything to keep you safe. Mrs. Bevans, Ms. Alpuche, Mrs. Bencias Macmillan, Mr. Gongora, thank you all for joining us tonight. And before we go, I just want to tell everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for the feedback. And we will see. We will take a break, and we will be back in just a minute. All right, and good evening again, everybody. Welcome back to Dialogue with the Diaspora. I'm Dan Gutierrez, and it is a real pleasure to have spent some time with you tonight. We are almost done with tonight's session. We have one more guest, one more person who lives in the United States and has been living in the United States for a very long time. This particular person is a colleague, is a friend, is a Belizean first and foremost, is a Belizean who has achieved has gone very, very far in his career. And we're going to let him talk more to us about that today. His name is Ambassador Nestor Mendes. He has been a diplomat with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for several years now, and is presently serving his second 5-year stint as the Assistant Secretary General of the Organization of American States. Ambassador Mendes, good evening. Welcome to our show, and congrats, sir, for being our very first spotlight. We are honored to have you on tonight's show. Ambassador.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Gutierrez, Dan, my friend and my colleague. It's fantastic to be on your show. First of all, congratulations. I was watching the earlier part of the show, and the information that was being exchanged, both on the part of the experts as well as the point of view and the inquiries from the diaspora. It's absolutely essential. You know, people are watching, people are waiting, people want to come home, but we want to do it in a way that's safe. So thank you for those that are making sure that our country is safe, that our people are safe. And thank you for sharing this very important program with us.
No, thank you. Thank you, Ambassador Mendes. In fact, you are one of those persons, and I will say it here, who is always looking out. I hope this doesn't get you into trouble with the OAS, but always looking out for Belize, always been there certainly for the Belize mission, always looking out for Belize. Thank you for that. Let me ask you this. Tell us, how does a young man from rural Orange Walk, and I just bring that up because rural Orange Walk has been in the news over the last couple of hours. How does a man from rural Orange Walk make it all the way to Washington, D.C., to the second most important job, to the second highest job, I should say, in the Organization of American States? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, Dan, I was born and I grew up in San Antonio, Rio Hondo in the Orange Walk district. That's, for those of you who don't know, it's on the very infamous route now to Botes. It's Orange Walk, then Yeo Creek, then San Antonio, then Santa Cruz, then the border. Um, I grew up there. I have extremely fond memories of growing up in a village, quiet way of life, a lot of freedom, growing up in a very close-knit family with my parents, my siblings, my brothers, sisters, cousins, a very free kind of village life. Beautiful, beautiful river there. I remember going fishing in the river with my father and my brothers, and of course, going to the farm with my brothers and my grandfather and my dad. And growing up there was just wonderful. And I think that what is important about that beautiful, simple, uncomplicated way of life is that it develops a certain person in you, especially when it comes accompanied by the instillment of certain values, hard work. There's no shame in hard work. Whatever you want, you work hard for it, you can get it. And growing up in the village and then going to school in Orange Walk Town, eventually high school, because I went to primary school, all my primary school in San Antonio in the primary school, was a bit of a change and a bit of a challenge. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger. Then going to school in Belize City, eventually to sixth form, and then to UCB at the time. All of those, the challenges just kept getting bigger and bigger, and you just keep adjusting, but always going back to those important values. And whenever you feel lonely, whenever you feel the need to reconnect, you know that for me, San Antonio will always be there. And I try to go back as much as I can when I can go back to Belize. It is fantastic. That river is wonderful.
Absolutely. I mean, there's nothing like being grounded in something as important as those memories of the motherland, and we certainly do thank you for the contributions you have made. Now, let me tell you this. Let me say this, Ambassador Mendes. You have been living in the United States for a very long time. You come and go to Belize a lot. It's always in your heart. For those thousands, in fact, for those tens of thousands of Belizeans who are right now in the United States, who are sitting, watching this show and saying, how can I help? What can I do? What is your advice?
When things get difficult at home, all of us feel it. All of us feel it because we're Belizeans first and foremost. I think that a very practical way right now, a very practical way in which we can do more than share solidarity and share our prayers, a very practical way to do it is if you are somewhere in the US, you've been putting off a visit to Belize, you've been thinking of doing a refurbishment of a home, you've been thinking of doing perhaps an extension on a property, or planting an additional, 200 coconut trees that you're planning to grow on your farm, or eventually develop coconut grove. Any investment, as small as it is, anything that you can do to get our economy going, now is the time to do it. And of course, when it is safe and the conditions apply and we can do it safely in a way that protects the country, the people, and us, let's go back to Belize. That is the place where we need to go to spend time, spend the vacation, and any monies that you have to spend instead of going anywhere else in the world. Now is the moment that your country needs you. We are in this together.
Right, and because of technology, Ambassador, you don't, well, I mean, we'd love to have you back. You just heard the earlier part of the show where we are encouraging people to come home, but you don't necessarily need to do that. If you were thinking of flying to Europe, if you were thinking of going to Asia, take that part of the money that you have and build that extension, as you said. Plant those 2 acres of coconut. Imagine every time you do that, you hire a fellow Belizean. Every time you do that, you contribute to Belize's economy. So I think it is important to emphasize that point that you made and to give that good advice that you just gave. Ambassador, we don't have too much time left on the show. We're certainly grateful and honored by your joining us. Any last statements that you want to leave for the audience in the United States tonight?
Yes. So even as we're worried about the safety in terms of health of our country, in terms of the economy, remember that also we have a very young population who are still going to school. School has now, the opening has now been postponed further, and many of our school children don't have the technical facilities to be able to access online learning. Whatever you can do to help, please, they need you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Mendes. Ambassador, as I said, I'm going to say it again because it's important for Belizeans to know this. Ambassador Mendes serves as the Assistant Secretary General of the Organization of American States. And for those of you who may need to be reminded, the Organization of American States is the organization that works with Belize and Guatemala in the adjacency zone area, works very, very close with both countries. And I can tell you, there hasn't been a day that I've always been able to pick up the telephone, call folks at the OAS, and certainly call Ambassador Mendes, and he has always had advice for us. He has always been there for us. And when you have a Belizean at such a high level, clearly it is something you would like to see, something you expect, I suppose, over time, but something that when it happens, you're very grateful for. So I certainly want to take the opportunity and emphasize Belize's gratitude for your good work. And like Ambassador Mendes, there are any number of Belizeans who do stellar work all over the United States and all over the world really. And those people, many of you Belizeans, always have Belize at the bottom of your heart, always are remembering Belize, and always are praying for Belizeans back home, and we are grateful for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us for this first episode. As expected, we had a dynamic conversation with very electric guests who all have very expansive experiences and solid suggestions to improve the way things are done. You heard the suggestions from Dr. Macmillan, from Mr. Ray. Also important in this forum, and in general, is the steady flow of information to keep everyone in the loop as we all continue to adapt to an ever-evolving time that we find ourselves in given this pandemic. Please do not forget that the Embassy of Belize is there. Even though the consular offices may not be functioning the way they have been to protect our own staff, you certainly can communicate with them. And please don't forget to do that. Dialogue with the Diaspora will be back again next Thursday at 8 p.m. right here on Channel 7 and on Facebook at Colorblind Multimedia and on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs page. Do enjoy the remainder of the night. Continue to social distance, wear your face mask, and to be ever vigilant. Stay safe and good night.